After watching the Netflix series Pandemic: How to Prevent an Outbreak, it has shown me how history can repeat itself. And one of the first topics that they touched basis on was about the war, World War One in 1918, and how basically those soldiers brought back the virus from wherever they were fighting at back to their families. And the craziest part about it is that they didn't really have any advanced means of transportation. So they weren't really flying back home or, driving in their cars back home with a bunch of people in the car. Um, and about 50 million people passed away from this pandemic back then in 1918. And if you fast forward now, and the numbers that we have with COVID it's quite amazing. But we'll touch bases with that later. Um, at the beginning of the show, they had this really good simulation on in a hospital, and they basically had it where all the nurses and the doctors basically had to make sure that they knew how to suit up in their PPE gear and go into those front lines and take care of patients who couldn't breathe, who said that they were in a lot of pain and things like that, and make sure that they were given the proper medicines and vaccines that they needed to make it through the day, or whether to recognize if they needed to be taken to ICU or to just be monitored exactly where they were at. Then there was also another doctor who worked in a very small county in Jefferson County out in Oklahoma, who basically was really the main doctor there, and she had a couple of patients who were pretty much sick and saying that they didn't really have the means to, if a pandemic hit their city, their county, they wouldn't have the means of trying to take care of everyone there because everything was pretty much low. They would have to, their hospital was too small to take care of such a big and lethal virus like what we're going through now with COVID. Um, you have you have H1N1, and basically people use that same virus name and they call it the swine flu, like out in India. So you had two people out in India. There was a gentleman and a woman. The woman was able to make it, and it's crazy because the woman actually came from a really small town wherever she lived, and they never tested her for the flu. They thought it was just a common cold, and then something told them, like, okay, you know what, we need to go to a bigger hospital. They went to the bigger hospital, and as for certain, the doctor there tested her and said, yeah, you have the flu, we have to get you to ICU. She had been sick for about 15 days. So they got her to the hospital right on time, right when they needed to. And thankfully she made it and everything was okay. Then you had the older gentleman, and the older gentleman unfortunately did not make it. He did pass, and he was an older gentleman, and he suffered a lot from body aches and pains and things like that. And his body just couldn't take what the virus was doing to his body and how it was attacking it. And unfortunately he didn't make it. Um, so a lot of these viruses come from emerging viruses from back then, but they just come back bigger and better. And you have viruses like SARS, Ebola, and MERS that come back. We just don't know when or the capacity of how big they'll come back when they come back. Me personally, my family, well, for starters, I am still able to work, and I'm very thankful for that during this pandemic. My job is considered an essential job. The branch that I work at actually did close because we don't have barriers to talk to customers. So I was moved over to another branch where I'm able to go ahead and help customers without that one-on-one, that contact, person-to-person contact. But in my family, we had about 3 people who were infected with it. My aunt actually works in a hospital. My cousin works at a car dealership, and my other aunt got it as well. But we believe that she got it from her daughter, who you would just go out, and they all 3 live in New York, which is the epicenter, as we know, for this virus. And my aunt and my cousin, they made it. Everything is fine. Unfortunately, my other aunt, she passed away last week. We buried her last week on Friday, and yeah, they put her on ventilators and things like that, and it just didn't work out for her. And she just wasn't going to put her body more than what she could handle, so she just decided it's just best for her to just go and be with the higher gods. So that's how I was affected with COVID-19.